Well, it's been a few days now since the news first came to us of the passing and the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I remember it was last Wednesday, and we were working, and a message came in from a private group chat, and someone said, "Please pray for Charlie. We're hearing that there's been shots fired at his rally in Utah." And then the news broke publicly that he had been shot, and a few minutes later, that it had been confirmed by the president that he passed away. And that's been just a real spirit of heaviness over our work and over a lot of what we've been doing and talking about for the last several days and the last week. And so we wanted to just take a moment and come on here and share some of those thoughts and give some reflection on Charlie's life and on what he meant, what he accomplished, and also what that means going forward. And so we just wanted to pass around a little bit. Sharayah, why don't you share just a few words about kind of what you've seen this week and what this means to you?
Well, Charlie was just a one-of-a-kind guy, and I've thought several times these past few days that, it's just really sad to me that they took one of our best, if not our best. He was an eloquent speaker, a great debater. He was willing to be civil and engage with people who totally disagreed with him vehemently, and yet that didn't mean he wouldn't listen to them or talk with them. But he was quick on his feet to be able to answer. He had a lot of facts just in his brain at his quick disposal, and that's really disarming to people when they think they can stump him, but then they can't. But then above all of that, just his Christian character and joyful spirit. Never have I seen him without a smile, and he was always so kind to us and affirming and encouraging. And so, yeah, this week is just an
really
incredible loss, a big loss.
Colin, we've worked with Charlie for several years, first in Anaheim at an event back in 2020 or 2021. You were with us for that, weren't you?
Yep, sure was. Yeah.
He spoke to pastors and encouraged them to be bold and courageous.
Well, honestly, Charlie's courage for his faith is what stands out most to me.
Yeah.
And it's been really cool to see pastors and Christians as a whole, but especially pastors across the country that are so emboldened now or have been emboldened by Charlie's bold witness himself. And I can't think of a single video or an event that we were at with him or otherwise that Charlie didn't start and end by sharing his faith. And we talked about a whole realm.
Yeah.
He talked about a whole realm of issues and was so knowledgeable on political and national issues that were happening. But I would say his greatest strength is his clarity of the gospel and his ability to share what Christ had done for him and the transformation that had happened in his own life in salvation of sin. And so I think that's what I'm most thankful for. And I think Christians across the country would echo that.
It was really clear to see how he grew in his own faith in these recent years. I think in the last 4 or 5 years, he really became a much deeper person of faith. You can see that as you watch his videos progress, the types of answers he's giving, the depth of his biblical knowledge, the depth of his faith and apologetic argument for a defense of the faith, that he was giving robust church history arguments, biblical arguments, expositional arguments. And really, it feels like the political engagement took a backseat to his faith in some ways, talking about we do engage in politics, we do engage in these things, we do engage in our biblical values because of what Christ has done for us and because of what we believe is true from Scripture. So perhaps the life that started with an interest in politics and a focus on that certainly ended with that as well, but with a heavy emphasis on his faith that seems clear for all to see.
Yeah, and he conveyed it, like you said, Colin, in such a palatable way and such a winsome way and in just simple terms, everyday common speak. It wasn't in words that, non-Christians couldn't understand. And it's what I would say just regular, normal people can relate to the way he spoke and just made it so clear. He didn't make it convoluted at all.
That's right. His clarity on issues and his ability to relate to people is what he will absolutely be remembered for, and is the testament to his success that he found. Authenticity is just so important. It always has been, but I feel like even more so today. That's certainly part of President Trump's success. That was what Charlie found in success in reaching young people, was he cut through all of the fluff and just spoke the truth in a way that people could understand. He was authentically himself. I even watched a couple of videos where someone did prove him wrong and he changed his opinion. And I think those are some of the most fun videos watching of Charlie, because he just held honest, authentic discussions, largely with young people, with college students.
This is truly, I mean, of course, it's a national tragedy that's happened. We're talking this week about the funeral and the memorial service. We're talking about him lying in the Capitol and what's going through there with some of the processes before Congress. The vice president today hosted the Charlie Kirk podcast. And so just the national attention that's come on this has been unprecedented. But Charlie's voice has only gotten louder. And the things he stood for, the things that he championed, I look on my social media feed, and it's almost exclusively Charlie Kirk clips right now. And he had a loud voice before. He reached a lot of people. He talked to a lot of kids, a lot of young people. But it has become 10 times or 100 times louder in the reach that he has right now. And it's been a real reach for the gospel, a real reach for the cause of Christ, a real example, but also a reach for America. He fought for America. He believed in America. He believed in this American experiment, and he wasn't willing to give up on it. That's really rang clear in so many different ways to me, that he was fighting for our country. He was fighting for the future of our country. And really, I feel like he gave our country back to the next generation, a time that conservative politics were a thing of the older generation and a thing that really had maybe was beginning to sunset in some ways. He brought an entire younger generation into conservative values, into conservative politics. I think that was hugely to be credited in President Trump's successful election this last time, and in so many different ways. What do you guys think about what Charlie did as far as bringing along a generation that was not conservative before?
Well, you're 100% right that he was integrally involved in President Trump winning this election. I think if he had not done all he had done to hold rallies, some of which the campaign itself has said, there's where some have been even run better than ours at times. But he did an incredible amount. And then even after, during the transition period, they talked about on the podcast with Vice President Vance today that he was in the transition team area and working closely together, basically sun up to sundown, working together on those things. So he was incredibly invested as a volunteer, just because he loved our country. And yeah, like his appeal to the young people has been huge. I think what's interesting is we see so much of the issue in America right now is coming from the younger generations who have been in these college campuses and have been indoctrinated with very radical leftist ideas from professors who are, it's becoming really clear day by day now what they've been teaching. But at the same time, the promise or the hope or the solution seems to be coming from Generation Z too, Gen Z, because that's who he was talking to, and that's who really has latched on to Charlie Kirk so much. If you talk to the young people, I mean, they know who he was, and they were all about it, and that's why now you see like 32,000 new requests to start Turning Point USA chapters in high schools and colleges. It's massive. I think these kids are going, like, we don't want to be hoodwinked, and like, you're not going to like pull this over on us. We are hearing clearly what one side says and what the other side says, and we're going to speak for ourselves and use our own brains. And then, all these ideas that have been foisted upon us, we're beginning to see are really not for our good, and they're not good overall. So it's really encouraging, I think, to see the young people, even younger than us, come around to mega support, involvement, and being active in our country.
Well, Charlie also had a proper view of Christians in government and the need for Christians to be involved in the self-government of our nation. And he well understood the balance of faith in the public square and in the way our government operates, not creating a theocracy, as we've seen that. He would tell you that hasn't worked throughout history, but creating a government that is run by people of faith. People of faith are involved in the government of their nation, shaping policy, shaping culture. And I think that that's key. I hope and pray that the takeaway from Charlie's life is the need to be involved in the way that our government is run, and that Christians across this nation would stand up for their faith, stand up for their values, and the values that have made America great for centuries. And so, I think we're starting to see that. And so my prayer is that holds.
Definitely.
Well, it was just a couple days ago. I mentioned all these clips I'm seeing now that are scrolling through. One of them was Charlie talking about Christian nationalism. He said, "I'm not a Christian nationalist, but I am a Christian, and I am a nationalist. And one of my favorite clips of him that's come to light recently is in a debate walking through, and he walked through the number of the state constitutions that had clearly, explicitly religious statements involved in them, and the number of founders that were attending Bible-believing churches regularly, and the clear Christian influence upon the founding of our country. And he brought all that to bear and said, we're in trouble right now in America because our country was built to work for a moral and religious people. And we have that type of a government in place, but we have lost the morality. We've lost the good that comes with a religious people. And so he saw the future of our country being in preserving our documents, preserving our Constitution, preserving the founding vision for America, and then raising our Christian witness, raising our morality, raising the standard of good to meet that, to once again bring our population and our citizenship back to the level of functioning as a moral and a civil people, to bring our country back to where it needs to be. And that seems like such a compelling vision for what we're trying to do in the Danbury Institute, and for what other groups are coming along and standing in that gap now and saying, we need to raise the level of Christianity. We need to see revival in this country, come back to our people being once again a moral and a religious people, that these governing documents and our founding fathers' vision will serve well.
Right. Yeah, our Constitution is nowhere near dead. Our country was set up in a good way. And so it is up to us to lead that charge for revival and great awakening across our country, so that we do once again have a country that respects morality and that embraces our Christian values. And if we do that, it's really like this two-part key. When you have both of those parts of that key, then they can turn the lock together. But a good constitution on its own is not going to be enough, and the country full of believers is not quite enough. We really need these two things working together, with Christians who are involved in a government that is based on law and justice, and systems that are built up from what we know in the Bible about law and justice. But when all of those things work together in tandem, that's when we see it really firing on all cylinders.
Well, we also need to take up the mantle of quality discussion of ideas and an exchange of thought. And that's what Charlie championed, especially on these college campuses, was discussing the ideas that shape policy, that shape culture, that shape our country, and having those discussions so that the best idea wins out. And it pulls those ideas from the American people all across the country. And so, again, I just love watching those videos on college campuses, and seeing him explain his position. And I was also frequently impressed by college students that or other guests that would come up to a microphone and well argue their point and their perspective. And I think that is the concept, the right method to build a really strong nation, is all of these groups talking and discussing ideas. And it is amazing, I have to just say, when those discussions take place, almost always the conservative idea wins out.
Yeah.
Well, America is built on having those kind of discussions, and it's built upon that level of civil engagement. Charlie's life was devoted to, all the way up until the very final moments of it, was devoted to having an earnest discussion, an earnest dialogue across the divide. And our country is so divided right now. We've seen people, even in his death, taking advantage of these opportunities to try and say, I saw a tweet yesterday that said, "Make America hate again," playing on the "Make America Great Again," and this idea that we need to hate those who are different than us. Charlie was one who would have absolutely stood against that and said, we are all Americans. And the moment that we put down the microphone, and the moment that we quit talking to each other, that's the moment that the end is really here. That when we can't have an earnest dialogue, or we can't discuss across the aisle anymore and have an open exchange of ideas with a willingness to change someone's mind if they can see a better way or find a better way forward, when we can't do that anymore, we really don't have a country. And so I think he was one of the threads that was holding this country together around those ideas. And someone who is accused of being so politically charged or so right-wing that his ideas were untenable, he seems to be one of the threads, I think, that was really holding this country together in some ways. And without him, it seems that both sides are already picking up into that divided nature that we really need to stand against.
I can see this even on a personal level. If you look on your Facebook, you probably are seeing people that you know that are saying a very wide range of things in the wake of this. And some of the things people say might surprise you, but I think when we see people make comments that surprise us, especially in a bad way, the thing there is not to stay in our silo and be like, well, that person is crazy, or I don't agree with them, but I'm not going to say anything. This is a moment to be like Charlie and say, hey, let's talk about that. What do you mean by that? Or have you thought about this? How can we engage even in our own personal spheres in a way that is not degrading to another human being, but encouraging someone to say, well, let me back up my claim with some information about why I think that. And maybe you don't want to do it on a public comment thread, although that certainly probably breeds some more courage among other people. But maybe you want to just DM someone and say, hey, I saw you said such and such. Do you really mean that? And, are you really feeling that way, and why? But it's an opportunity, I think, even on a micro level for us to be involved even in a small way in that.
They've said recently that it's kind of become a trending phrase to say we're all Charlie Kirk, and of course we're trying to look at what do we do with this, where do we go forward from here, how do we move forward, but there's a true principle to we all now need to step up. We all need to let our voices be heard. We all need to speak about the truth that we know. Charlie was about the truth. He was about the truth of God's word. He was about the truth of what's true in America. He was about the truth of just biological realities, of there's two genders, and our country is a great country for these reasons, and that capitalism is the best way to have free market economics that promotes individual wealth and prosperity and human flourishing, all of those things. He was willing to get in there and to say the truth. And without him, it's a moment for each of us to say, we need to let our voice be heard. We need to speak out. We need to be more willing to engage in these issues and to speak about these things. And that's certainly what we're committed to doing through the Danbury Institute. That's what the three of us are committed to doing in our own capacity. But this is a moment to lean in. This is a moment to engage and to push forward, not to be afraid, not to withdraw, not to back down, but to say, no, this is our country. This is our community. These are our churches. This is our faith. And we're going to be those who articulate these points and carry the banner forward.
I was really struck by one thing. I think Erica Kirk mentioned that they had conversations about if he ever ran for higher office, what would that look like? And he said to her, if I ever did, I would want to make it all about restoring the family, fatherhood, being a husband, being a wife, what it means to follow God's design for a family. That we know that the family is the building block for our society. And when that begins to crumble, our society and our civilization crumbles. So, sometimes I'm talking in the last few days with people about like, what do we do and how do we go on and how can I actually make a difference? Because people have that burning on their heart. And I think that one way we really can lean into that is to be all for the family, for God's design for the family. And that might look like being a really good husband, being a really good wife, being a really good mom, loving your family, and instilling those values in your kids. That's not wasted time. That is incredibly important. In our own sphere of influence in our family, we have an opportunity to shape the next generation. If everybody does that in their own family, then we will solve this problem by leaps and bounds. We don't all have to have a giant stage or a giant following or a huge audience to make a difference. We can make a difference just by living the right way in our own family before our own kids, loving them and showing them what's true and raising them up well.
Well, and above all, my earnest prayer is that what comes out of the tragedy of Charlie Kirk's murder is a re-emphasis on our relationship with Christ, and that people would listen to what Charlie said about what Christ did in his life, the fact that he recognized that he was a sinner just as we all are, and that he was in need of salvation, and he trusted Christ to forgive his sins, and his life was built according to that principle. And so I pray that the people watching this video and the people who look at Charlie Kirk's life, perhaps many of them for the first time in a real way, would see his faith and decide they are in need of salvation, and two, they would order their life and their family in a way that honors Christ, and in a real tangible way find Bible-believing church to be a part of. And honestly, that's the best way we can change this nation, is by winning souls for Christ, allowing Christ to transform hearts and lives, and letting Christ reign in this nation again.
And that's the work that we have to do in these next 3 years, because, Charlie worked really hard to help us get the blessing of having a good president in office right now. And they're doing great work. But we are going to have another election again, and so this is not the end. We have a lot of work to do. And if we don't begin to see a major shift in our country on a spiritual level with revival and great awakening, then it's all the politics in the world will not fix it. So you're so right, Colin. That is the chief thing that we need to be focused on, is reaching people for Christ.
Absolutely. What a note to end on. Charlie's life is a reminder to all of us that life is a vapor, that none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. What a young marriage, what a young family, young children. There was no likelihood of this being what we thought would happen. And we were all shocked. We're all stunned by this. We still are. We've talked about the heaviness. We've talked about the spirit of weightiness that's been on us all this last week. A sobering reminder that the work of the Lord is now, and that we desire to re-engage, to grow deeper in our faith, to build strong churches, to champion pastors, being willing to speak and to encourage and to engage the truth, calling Christians to be on the front lines, to be salt and light in the world around us, and defenders of our faith, sharing Christ, defending what we believe in, defending conservative values, families, all of those things. Charlie dedicated his life to that. He gave his life for that cause, and what a mantle, what an opportunity to pick that up and to move forward and to lean into the values that he championed, that he was so committed to, and that we stand for as well. And so this is the moment to lean in. This is the moment to move forward for Charlie, for his sake.
Yes, for Charlie.
Guys, we don't want to belabor this, but thank you for the time today to talk about these things and to just think about what the future holds and how to move forward. And we certainly are eager to do that together through the Danbury Institute.
This has been an edition of the Life and Liberty podcast of the Danbury Institute. The Danbury Institute is an association of churches, Christians, and organizations aligned to affirm and preserve God-given rights to life and liberty. To learn more, visit danburyinstitute.org. The work of the Danbury Institute relies on generous patriots like you. To support, visit danburyinstitute.org/give.